brother just told me. Jay, why are we laughing so much? How many years, John?
I started teaching Hamlet when Lyndon Johnson was president.
And she says, I met the youthful Lord Paris at Lawrence's cell and gave him what becoming love I might, not overstepping the bounds of modesty.
No, I already did that with the other
I should
guy.
say not.
Him and Beowulf and...
But you know, when he dies, he's like desperate to be remembered. Tell my story. Remember me.
Should we be doing this? Should we stop right now?
No.
And Jay, we're back. It's been a month. I looked at my calendar, 1 month, and I'm blaming the Christmas break. Teachers just like disappear, over Christmas break. And I think it's kind of what we did too here with teachers. Yeah.
Okay.
It was good. It was good though. But we took the time off. We actually got right at the end of the break. We got 2 snow days. It was amazing. So we had this little extension over snow, and my inner 8th grader, was extremely pleased. And I've just been living on that schedule my entire life. Excited about it. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the 43rd grade. That's basically where I'm.
Yeah, exactly. Just going through that schedule. I was excited and waking up. Oh, they're going to cancel, and looking at my phone, and sure enough,
Yep.
But we had a serious snow, which was also fun. So,
very cool. We haven't had that yet. It's absolutely ridiculously cold and windy right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The coldest it's been in years.
Yeah.
But no real snow yet.
Yeah.
So we'll get a blizzard tomorrow because I just said that.
Yeah, you might get hit. You might get hit with it. Yeah, we've got that cold too. It was single digits, last night.
Yeah.
So winter's on. But things are warming up over in Ithaca. So we'll transition.
Oh my gosh.
Where it never snows. And where 2 people who've been separated for a long, long time are coming back together. So in our last episode, we were in book 18, and we're setting up this reconnoitering, this putting of things in order, but specifically of Odysseus in disguise as a beggar coming to this intense interview with Penelope. It's a great exposure for Penelope. We as the audience haven't got to know her very well. So we get to see her in this book, I think significantly for the first time. So so that's a blast. So this is book 19. If you're following along with us, Jay's got the Emily Wilson translation, which I have too. I was going back through my notes from this translation. Really enjoyed it enormously. It's great, but I'm also working from the Robert Fitzgerald translation, which I've read a lot as well. So we'll bring both those translations to bear, and we recommend, either one, both read well. But before we jump into book 19, Jay, do you have a poem for us?
I found this beautiful poem. I had never seen it before. I was poking around, and a lot of book 19 has to do with how we recognize each other. Yeah. And I found a poem called Recognitions, and it's by Rachel Hadas, Hadas. And I teach at a school where my son graduated from the school, and I got to drive him to and from school for 7 years.
Yeah.
And this poem really resonated with me, and I think it might with you, Paul, and some of the people watching. So it's called Recognitions. When my son was a few weeks old, replicas of his yawning face appeared suddenly on drowsy passersby. Middle-aged man's gape that split his beard, old woman on a bus, a little girl, all told a story that I recognized. Now, he's 15. As my students shuffle in the door of the classroom, any of the boys could easily be him, foot dragging, also swaggering a little, braving the perils of a public space by moving in a wary little troop. But the same sleepy eyes, the same soft face. We recognize the people whom we love, or love what we respond to as our own, trusting that one day someone will look at us with recognition.
That's very nice. Recognitions.
Yeah. But anyway, I thought you'd like that poem.
Yeah, no, I do. I do like it. I like that, and I like the emphasis on recognitions in this book because I think that is well, it's the title in the Fitzgerald translation. The chapter title is "Recognitions and a Dream," which pulled together the bulk of the chapter
Yeah.
in those two words, really, recognitions and dream. And I think it also kind of gets into my one of my main points for tonight too about recognition, and it's the kind of thing that makes you want to reread the chapter and reread it. I reread it twice today in preparation for this, looking for things, looking for more signs of recognition
Mm-hmm.
in the chapter. But it's human. It's that's what you see in other people. You stare so closely at your own children's face that then you see in strangers' faces things you wouldn't have
Yeah.
recognized before. You just don't stare that closely
Right.
at strangers. And um, and Penelope and Odysseus are two people who've spent a lot of intimate time together early in their life. And so one of the conceits of this chapter is that somehow they have to be strangers to each other, but also not strangers to each other, hidden. And there is a dramatic discovery in the chapter that kind of, and doesn't exactly, maybe it foreshadows, it at least illustrates a recognition, a scene that you're waiting for, which is Penelope's scene, and so yeah, it's very much the topic, and it's just so human. It draws you in.
Mm-hmm.
It draws you in that way. So, yeah, I appreciated that. I appreciated that poem, and it's definitely on topic. But let's jump in. Let's jump in with this chapter. It's 19 when we left the house. Chapter 18 last time. Odysseus had gotten a stool thrown at him by Eurymachus, I think, and then all the suitors had left for the night sensibly, and Odysseus had made plans to chat with Penelope. She saw him as a stranger, as a beggar, and wanted to get information from the wider world from him, because that's how news spread around in that time. And Odysseus was trying to be careful. He thought if he met with her during the day and in the daylight that she might recognize him full on. So he made up an excuse and a story to meet at night after dark. And so they would sit close in the house after most of the lights were out and most people were gone. And he thought he could maybe sort of hide in the shadows a bit and get away with this. I don't know if he does or not. We can talk about that. But that's the plot setup. So the house is quiet. It's after dusk and evening, and then we're off. So I don't know. What do you want to start with? What do you have? Do you have sort of our obvious and essential part of this chapter that's going on that you want to draw our attention to?
Yeah. I start when I teach this, we have a conversation first about how we recognize each other. So there's obvious things you say. I see someone, you popped up tonight virtually, and I know it's you. So that's obviously one obvious way. But our students live in a virtual reality in which, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook is for old people. If Nana's on it, I'm not going to do it.
It's gone.
So they very carefully curate their identities in those spaces.
Yeah.
And allowing them the freedom to talk about all the different selves they are is actually really interesting. Like, I think something that really great literature teachers, I think Hamlet, Odysseus, Elizabeth Bennet, we can go on the line. Great characters show us that any of us are actually several people. Like, we have lots of different identities, right? And I'm not saying multi-personality disorder, but there's various elements to who we are, and we're complicated. And these characters show that in a stark, dramatic way. And allowing students to talk about that, it's true for them, Paul, differently than it was for us, because and we know probably people our age who see on social media other people's carefully curated lives, and they sort of recognize lives they wish they had, the perfect vacation pictures, the perfect workout pictures, the perfect Christmas family pictures. And the recognition there, the nature of the recognition is interesting because it's based on not a lie, but something that's incredibly carefully curated. Right. So there's a version of this now that's interesting that I think if you have a little preemptive conversation about, sort of conditions any reader to then look at this chapter and ask, because we have Eurycleia, we have Penelope, recognize or not recognize things, based on how they recognize. Yeah. And there's physical versions of that, intellectual, conversational versions of that. So I think that's interesting. And I think something at the heart of this book too Another conversation that we sometimes have before entering book 19 is having kids talk about like the lives of their grandparents. A lot of our kids are closer to their grandparents than their parents. It's just that time of life where like
Yeah.
grandparents spoil you, but also like my mother will say, she often joked that when she would take care of my kids, she'd say, I wish I could have skipped parenting and gone right to grandparenting. And she said, it's not because I get to spoil my grandkids. That's obviously fun. But my mother made the point, she's like, I also know what to do now.
Yeah.
Like, I know which battles to fight. I failed and succeeded 1,000 times. Like, I know what to do. But asking the kids about their grandparents, like actually think about them as people. Think about them as young people falling in love. Think about their wedding day. Think about having children, having babies, changing diapers, first communion. Like, go down the line and imagine how wildly different a 24-hour period is for your grandparents now than it was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And just get them wrestling with like, yeah, life is long, and like,
Mm-hmm.
how do they recognize each other now as opposed to, because the thing about Odysseus and Penelope, they're not just an older couple. They've been completely separate for 20 years.
Yeah.
So the nature of the recognition, I mean, there's physical recognition. Odysseus can show his license. I mean, whatever. I'm Odysseus,
Yeah.
literally.
Right.
But Odysseus and Penelope are wildly different human beings. And I think that's another preemptive thing you could do if you were teaching this or in a book group, is say, how is Odysseus different today than he was 20 years ago? What do you imagine different about him?
Yeah.
What do you imagine, how is Penelope different as a new mom, bright, shiny face in her early 20s, probably late teens? And imagine that. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's not in the book, I think it's healthy to just project and
Well, I
imagine
think-
who are they 20 years ago? What was that like? Who are they now? And then that kind of sets you up for like, oh my God, they're going to meet. And they're so wildly different. They should be in love. Like, it just is really messy and interesting and complicated and dramatic. And, you know,
It completely is. And the plot works well enough. I think for early readers, if you're taking students through this text for the first time, you can just read it very straightforwardly on the surface that, you know, that Penelope finds out when she finds out. But the really nice thing about this chapter is that when you start thinking about, and if you prepare students the way you have done, Jay, to really think about Eurycleia and how she would recognize Odysseus, and think about Penelope. What does she know about Odysseus? What does she love? What is she holding out for all these years? Why would she hold out all these years for Odysseus? She's looking for an aura, a reassurance, which she articulates in this chapter, that she begins to feel around this, around that is the basis of really of the identity of Odysseus that she loves and that she's holding out for. So there is that surface level, but you can keep going. And that was part of what I was doing going back into this chapter, was looking for signs and elements of what she was latching onto, because I've come to think more and more that in this chapter that she knows that it's Odysseus. And I want to talk about that later for the subtle, but I think she's found out, and that's begun to come through to me more and more in this chapter. I'll point out some places for that, but that is, it does pay. It does pay to go down, the path and think about them like real people. Think about Penelope and Eurycleia.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm not good at this, but sometimes I remember to do it. Paul knows, and I think Paul does this too. You do this too. I take a long time when I teach this. Like, I don't want to rush through a great meal, and I don't want to rush through a great book. So I might take a day not talking about the Odyssey at all. I might take a day talking about what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about the Odyssey, but like, imagine a day in the like, write about what Odysseus and Penelope as newlyweds talked about.
Yeah.
What were they worried about? What were they excited about? Right? A lot of our students have been to weddings, and they see how just joyful it is and optimistic, right? And just to be mindful that like, that's pretty much the last time they were together, was when they had a little tiny kid, barely newly married, right?
Yeah.
That's the last time they were together.
Yeah, that's right.
Paul, literally, that's like you and I having our first kids with our wives, and then coming back 20 years later. And not only coming back 20 years later, after hand-to-hand combat and seeing friends get slaughtered, and like, so we're wildly different, but our wives are wildly, like, I don't know. That's the fascinating drama. I don't want to go on and on, but like, that to me is worth the setup so that you can read this emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, not
And,
just
and
not
it's
just
great,
intellectually, but emotionally.
which is great. And I think, just, and then, yeah, we can move on. But I think the world that our students live in is so appearance based, so much more so in a way, when you think about social media, and so much of the life that you're projecting is just based in the way you can make yourself look in posts, almost literally. And this in this story and definitely invites you. I mean, the looks are gone. Penelope says it. My looks are shot. Odysseus, he's an old beggar and is in disguise, or is in the disguise of the history of his experiences, which have racked his body. But they still, what they want inside their heads, who they are in their souls and in their minds, is what you end up having to focus on, because
Yeah.
the physical, the post of on Instagram of their re-meeting, it's not going to get a lot of likes. It's not super beautiful, and
Right.
it's not going to be bright and happy. This is like two old people, maybe three if you're a client, sticks her head in the,
Yeah.
photo bombs it,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not beautiful. It's not. It doesn't sell that way, but it's nevertheless deeply, deeply satisfying. In here to see these two people get back together. You don't feel in it like it's too late. What does it matter? They're gone.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that I spent a lot of time sort of doing some pre-engagement discussions. But in terms of an obvious passage, I have a couple, and I didn't want to steal yours. So
No,
if
go ahead.
no, but if one of these is yours, I'll do the other one.
Yeah. Oh, it's fine.
Okay.
Mine is not. I mean, I don't really have a passage exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So mine is kind of a moment we've all been waiting for. The whole poem is a nostos. It's a homecoming. He's home. He's been home since book 13. So many chapters have gone. He's with his wife. And you can just, if this was a movie, like the strings would be playing. So in the Wilson, it's lines 114 to 405. I'm obviously not gonna read all of it, but I ask my students when we read it, like, pay attention to what stands out about their conversation with each other, truths they tell, lies they tell. I mean, it's this really interesting. She leads. She leads with, this is like 125-ish. She leads with, Penelope said cautiously, "Well, stranger, the deathless gods destroyed my strength and beauty the
Yeah.
day the Greeks went marching off to Troy." That is Penelope's refrain. And my Odysseus went off with them. Some god has ruined me. I miss Odysseus. My heart is melting. I'm fascinated by melting because tears, Homer loves that image. It reminds me of Smokey Robinson, Tracks of My Tears, that great Motown song. And folks, I just want you to know, this is the only podcast that will connect Motown to Homer.
Yes.
Paul's going to put on his velvet suit if we're not careful. But seriously, he loves that image of not just crying. Crying in Homer's never just crying. It's soul destroying. It's your face melts away. Like it's everything about you. So she ends up narrating to him the loom story that we heard earlier, and she asks him to talk, and he invents a story. And my students always are like, why doesn't he tell him the truth? He can't yet. The greatest good is he has to orchestrate everything. So he and his kid who's never fought and the swineherd who's never fought can kill 108 guys. Now, in the beginning of the chapter, all the suitors leave and he has Telemachus hide, put their weapons away. So that's a start. That's a start. But still, right? He shows incredible restraint. Line 210, she wept for her own husband who was right next to her.
Yeah.
Odysseus pitied his grieving wife inside his heart, but kept his eyes quite still, without a flicker, like horn or iron, and he hid his tears with artifice. Like, think of the strength, Paul. You haven't seen your spouse 20 years, and there she is. Now, when we talk about Odysseus as a hero, I'm never comfortable with any adjective with him because he's everything. He's heroic. So many times he's heroic. He's slimy and murderous. He's heroic. He's noble. He's not. And this is a moment where he has such incredible restraint, Paul. I mean, off the charts. And she
Right.
keeps talking about, the gods took this and the gods took that, right? But anyway, I think
Well, she does, and she's so open. I just say that like in contrast to his restraint and carefulness and artifice. That struck me this time going through it. Is she tells him exactly, a parent stranger, exactly what happened to her. She just lays it all out on the table.
Yep.
She's very, very, very exposed here. Very open.
Yep. So that's what I'm thinking about is like, he really takes his time with the interaction between the two people that we've waited the whole time for the interaction from. And Penelope tells all truths and Odysseus mostly lies. But in this instance, I argue that the lies are intentional, purposeful, and for the larger purpose of orchestrating the moments so that when the suitors come back, there's a plan in play. Like everything has to be set. Women are removed. Like everything is set up. So is it a lie? Yes, but there's a bigger picture.
Yeah. Right. Which is the justification of his skill. He needs, like you say, he needs to do it to set this thing up. And it's kind of funny.
I just want to say one other thing, and it's your turn.
No, it's fine.
One of the fun things about the Odyssey is almost every chapter there's something to fight about. And if teenagers love anything, they love a fight. So if you were to have them journal for 5-10 minutes reading this and say, look, we just read this, make a case for or against. Did Odysseus do the right thing?
Sure, right.
And then, because kids, we all do, we love passing judgment. And I always tell students, we're all encouraged to not be judgmental of actual people. But when you're a reader, forget it. Be judgmental. Your job is to be judgmental.
It totally is. Yeah. And I would say that's part of what you're doing is developing your ability to judge rightly, which you have to do in life. You have to make judgments about people and about circumstances. If you don't learn to do it well, you'll have a miserable life because it doesn't pay to be wrong. So you learn how to be, and they learn how to be judgmental in that way or to make true judgments in the way that's extremely helpful to them. Yeah, no, I think they would. I think they could fight about that. Like you just play the scenario out. Well, what happens if Odysseus tells the truth? Play it out. How does that hurt his chances?
Right.
Yeah, it's good, and that is a good way to draw students into the stories, is to get them to fight about something. But yeah, that's good. I think that's a good dynamic to to focus on, and it's kind of amazing the things that Odysseus lies about. Penelope appears to believe. So she says, wow, the story you tell just rings of truth like no one else. And then she presses him for some proof because he includes in his story, I saw Odysseus, this guy. I saw him, not that long ago on the island of Crete. And she says, really? What did he look like? What was he wearing? And she presses for these details. And of course he knows. And so he, he's able to convince her. But the thing that is true, that is blatantly true, that he says she doesn't believe, or seems not to, professes that she doesn't, because the thing he keeps insisting on is, I've seen him. He's not far away. He'll be here soon. And she's like, nah, I don't think so. I don't think he's going to be here. Right. So that's kind of, that's sort of interesting. She won't follow him down that path. She doesn't have that moment because she's with him all along. And so, saying, wow, what you say sounds true. Oh yeah, that is how you described him, the things he was wearing. I put those things on him before he left. Those actually are his clothes. And so the next breath you expect her to say, oh really? He's going to be here soon? That's awesome. Because why wouldn't she believe him? She believed everything else, and he had the proof, to convince her. But she pulls back whenever he says, "Oh, and he'll be here." She says on line 365, "Ah, stranger, if what you say could ever happen," because he says he'll be here probably in a couple days. She says, "Ah, stranger, if what you say could ever happen, you would soon know our love. Bounty too. Men would turn after you to call you blessed. But my heart tells me what must be. Odysseus will not come to me. No ship will be prepared for you." She says, "We have no master, and he's not coming back." And then she has this really curious line. I don't know what Emily Wilson has, how she translates it, but Fitzgerald has, "Or did I dream him? Or did I dream him?" She says.
Where is that at the end of her?
After... If you find the place where Odysseus says, I saw him, and then I left from the Phaeacians before he left. But before I did, I
Yep.
saw that he had all this money worth more
Okay,
than
yeah.
10 generations. And then Penelope replies after that. The attentive queen replied to him, "Ah, stranger, if what you say could happen." And then at the end of that little paragraph, she says, "Or did I dream him? Odysseus will not come back to me. We have no master, quick to receive and furnish out as our guest, as our Lord Odysseus was. Or did I even dream him?" As if maybe he never, she says kind of provocatively, as if maybe he never even existed.
Yeah,
And then she
Wilson,
says, "Maids,
Wilson,
come." Yeah, what does she say? Did you find it?
there's no master here to welcome visitors as he once did and send them off with honor. Was there ever a man like him?
Oh,
So
okay.
you wonder
Okay.
what the Greek is, because that's
Yeah.
content-wise two wildly different things.
Yeah, that's pretty different. Or was there ever a man like him? This doesn't read like that at all. It's almost like a pull out, or did
Yeah.
I dream him up? Did he ever exist?
Yeah,
We don't have
one is wondering if the person is possible at all, and one is wondering about the sort of mental status of the person talking.
Yeah. It's kind of neat.
Like what's real.
Right. Back to the recognition thing, back to the what's real deal. Am I waiting for something that's never going to come because it never did? So gone. So gone is it? But I find that kind of a sort of a provocative line, by
it's really
her.
good.
And right after that, Odysseus, and I kind of land on this line too, because right after it, Odysseus responds to her after she says, he'll never come back. And then she says, "But hey, I'll send the maids over here. They can, wash up, prepare beds for you, place for you to sleep." And then before Odysseus responds in the Fitzgerald, he says, warily Odysseus answered, as if he's on his guard, as if he's sniffed out something, as if he's trying to be even more careful now. Like maybe he's gone too far or something. There's something about how Penelope responded to him that makes him uncertain, uneasy. He doesn't want to give himself away. And he refuses the offer of the bed. He's like, "Oh, I've been sleeping on the floor for the last 20 years. I'll sleep on the floor again. And I don't need anyone to, wash my feet. I don't want these young maids, around touching me unless and then he says, unless you have an old maid around here, maybe that might be okay." And then Penelope says, yeah. And that sets up Eurycleia, coming and having the interaction she has with him. But I think for me, the obvious and essential overall that I want to say from this chapter that I think is good to land on is that, less a passage, more just a part of the plot, which is that this is a very hopeful chapter. It's a dark time in Ithaca. The ethos of Ithaca, as we talked about last time, is really dark and bad. All the leadership, the nobles, the people who ought to be in place are just rotten and ruined. The slave women in the household, these girls are just kind of rotten and ruined as well. They betrayed Penelope. They've been rude to her. They're rude to guests in the house. They do exactly what they're not supposed to, what they're not supposed to do. So it's sort of dark. And as you reminded us, Jay, Odysseus is facing, over 100 men they're going to have to take on with an untrained, son. Yeah. And so it's not nice. But here, before that gets off the ground, this night is a night that's kind of encouraging, that there's real goodness. The chapter opens to Telemachus and Odysseus are plotting. So Telemachus shows himself to have some capacity, possibly for warfare. He's willing and ready to take it on. We find in Eurycleia serious loyalty to Odysseus to the point of death, and that's encouraging. And then Penelope really shows her cleverness and her wisdom. So you don't get the feeling that somehow, I don't know, that she's going to be a problem or more for Odysseus to manage. It really isn't that way. You get this sense from her that she's going to be, like you get from Eurycleia and Telemachus, real contributors in this fight and be very helpful. And I think she does play that role in this chapter in a really particular way, which is kind of my subtle but crucial. But I guess my obvious and essential is that the essential part of this chapter is there's hope. There's this warm light burning in here of true love, of loyalty, of capacity and goodness in the midst of real darkness, real ugliness, on each side,
I think that's good. Yeah.
I think it's good to take away from this chapter. That's, to me, is a big part of what's built, in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the reader.
My subtle probably isn't that subtle. It's the great scene. Eurycleia is one of my favorite characters because, it's funny, and you and I have talked about this so often, that I'm not saying more contemporary literature can't invent things, But I feel like anytime I want to say in a modern poem or novel, oh wow, there's that. And then I'm like, oh wait, Shakespeare did that, Homer did a like. So there are new things. Yes, there are ways to experiment with language that
Yeah.
Homer and Shakespeare didn't do. But I often feel like I trick myself into believing that Shakespeare was the first person to create complicated, like morally complex, interesting characters out of formerly nameless working class or slavish people.
Yeah.
Gravedigger and Hamlet being like my favorite example, but there are others. And the fact, not that Eurycleia has what the Gravedigger has, but Eurycleia earlier on in the epic basically says to Penelope, like, if you don't like what I'm telling you, you can kill me. I'm telling you the truth. Like this
Yeah.
incredibly bold, heroic thing. As heroic as anything a soldier does in the Iliad or the Odyssey.
Yeah.
I find it, when I reread it yesterday, part of me wonders, and this maybe is ridiculous. Odysseus says to Penelope, you can have someone watch me, but I don't need like fancy stuff. Just like an old slave's fine, basically. Doesn't he know that probably the person who will end up washing him is also the person who's going to recognize the scar? So
Yeah.
is he almost doing this? Like, so I don't know. But anyway, we get this. This isn't my main point, but it's even interesting that this amazing woman, Eurycleia, agrees to, probably being commanded to wash Odysseus, the guest, which is part of hospitality, which Ithaca hasn't been doing hospitality, Xenia, probably for decades. So this might be the first time someone like Odysseus has been able to visit the island and be treated like a good Greek should be treated in 20 years.
Yeah.
And we get the story of the scar, which is fascinating. We get the story of his slimy grandfather. Fascinating.
I know, which is awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah.
Lying and pain is like in his DNA, which is fascinating. But, we get on line 465-ish, the old slave woman holding his leg and rubbing with flat palms came to that place and recognized the scar. She let his leg fall down into the basin. It clattered, tilted over, and the water spilled out across the floor. So, you are Odysseus, my darling child, my master. It's almost like she self-corrects. Her early impulses as almost like a mother figure, kind of like the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, who, while raunchy, clearly knows Juliet way better than Juliet's mother does. She knows the circumstances of her birth, how old she is.
Right.
My darling child, my master, I didn't know it was you. She glanced toward, this is the moment I want to focus on. She glanced toward Penelope to tell her it was her husband, but Penelope did not look back. She could not meet her eyes because Athena turned her mind aside. Athena doesn't want to out Odysseus yet.
Yeah.
Odysseus grabbed Eurycleia's throat with his right hand. This is an old woman whom he technically owns.
Yeah.
And he grabs her throat, and with the left, he pulls her close and whispered, Nanny, why are you trying to destroy me? You fed me at your breast. Now, after all my 20 years of pain, I've arrived back to my home. You found out. A god has put the knowledge in your mind. Be silent. No one must know, or else I promise you, if some god helps me bring down the suitors, I will not spare you when I kill the rest, the other slave women, although you were my nurse. So this is very similar to Argos, that Odysseus's plan to not get recognized until the final possible moment isn't foolproof. A dog senses his presence. But you know who else senses his presence? The woman who raised him.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't go home for decades, Paul, and you walk in and let's imagine you're dressed differently, you have a huge beard, whatever, how long would it take for your mother to recognize you?
Yeah. No time.
You talk a little bit, you mention one thing, she hugs you. Hey, Paul, I knew it was you. What's with the beard? What are you doing? You're crazy.
It wouldn't even be a question. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I find that really interesting. I find it interesting what you said before about Penelope. We meet Odysseus in book 5 as an utterly broken man in paradise.
Yeah.
And when Calypso says to him, you can go home, his response is, you're playing tricks on me. And Odysseus does that several times when presented with good news. His brokenness makes hope impossible.
Yeah.
Penelope, and there's a message here, and I don't want to get sociological or political, but I think Homer knew, or whoever Homer was, knew that if a man was serving for a long time, there's a particular brokenness to killing people and seeing friends killed. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's also a brokenness of being apart for a long time from the one you love and not knowing if you're ever going to be whole again as a family. And both are in the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Like, she can't imagine, like, she doesn't just say, I have, frown lines. She doesn't say she got older. That's not what she says. She says, my beauty left when he left.
Yeah.
He's a part of me. I'm a part of him. Separated from each other, I'm actually not me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then you're raising a kid. Now, she has a staff. She's not really doing the raising, but like, she's worried about him. She's keeping these 108 guys at bay. There's all these. She's broken as much as he is, albeit under different circumstances.
Right.
So I just find it really interesting. You do have Odysseus totally eyes on the prize, needing to time things in a particular way. So he's even threatening the life of basically like almost like a grandmotherly figure, which I can't even, but his goal is his goal and nothing's getting in the way. And there's an honor in that, as weird as that is to say.
Well, absolutely. And it kind of works too. Since he's always on, he's always conniving, always crafting something. I mean, it kind of works. If you see it in that light, it works. Eurycleia, she doesn't flinch. She knows exactly what's going on. I see her just staring right back into his face. And she says, are you kidding me? They couldn't get this information out of me. They wouldn't be able to drag it out of me with wild horses. They couldn't beat it out of me with a stick. I'm loyal through and through. And if you need help killing some of those disloyal maids later on, I'm up for it. So it brings out what he needs to know about Eurycleia as well, which is that she's, just iron spine, to the core, loyal to Odysseus. And it's so hopeful. And it's such a beautiful picture of how things ought to be there. And it's not, just like Argos, as you mentioned, is a great picture of the way things ought to be. And it's not, they're in the house. So that's hopeful.
Yeah.
It's a great scene. It's a great scene. It's dramatized in a way that you could it's almost like instructions for filming, like it's laid out. It could be a great scene in a filmed in a movie. Although I don't know that I've ever seen it filmed well.
Yeah.
We might soon. Christopher Nolan, the big announcement.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's doing the Odyssey, with Matt Damon is starring as Odysseus. So
I hope, Paul, I would give any amount of money if he keeps his Good Will Hunting South Boston accent. And he just says like, Calypso, this is so weird. You got all these plants here, How
do you like those apples?
How do you like them apples? She probably has Paul, I would be all in for that.
Yeah. Well, someone's going to AI generate that.
I love this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And I have this whole thing. Maybe I'm not going to get off on it now, but I watched over Christmas break. I rewatched the Christopher Nolan movie that I had seen it, years ago, and I just rewatched it. I'm just blanking on the name of it. The space travel movie he did.
Martian?
No, crap! It just went out of my head. Now I'm not going to be able to remember it.
It's okay.
But it just struck me. But my son had asked me, "Do you think this is going to be a good movie?" The Odyssey version of it. And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know how to think of it." But after watching this movie, it was so kind of mythological at its core in the story. I thought, all right, here's hope that Christopher Nolan actually will do something really good, with this. Which it could be bad, but I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, it's a great scene with Eurycleia's recognition. And it makes me, and this is what takes me to my subtle sort of crucial point here. I think it is kind of crucial to track with Penelope and ask yourself this question: does she know? Does she know? Has she figured it out? And I think there's some little breadcrumb trails through this that can make you think that maybe she does know. And I think that first line where she says, "Or did I dream him?" is sort of a provocation that Odysseus responds to kind of warily. It seems like his antenna are up. Maybe she's onto something here. I don't know. And then when she sends Eurycleia to Odysseus, she says, and I don't know if it's in the Wilson translation, but she says in the Fitzgerald translation, she says, Eurycleia, come and bathe your master. And then the next line is, I almost said, because I was thinking that he was, he's so much like your master. Where is that line? She says,
Yeah, in the Wilson, it's get up, Eurycleia, wash your master's age mate. In other words, this guy that's as old as Odysseus.
yeah.
And then she says, by now, Odysseus himself must have wrinkled feet and hands like these. We mortals grow old fast and
This, Odysseus himself would look exactly like that. Yeah,
funny. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, come and bathe your master. Period. I almost said, comma, for they are of an age, and now Odysseus' feet and hands would be and seemed like his, and grow old soon in hardship. Yeah. So the thought is planted in your head. She starts to go down that path a little bit. Then you get the imagery or the drama of Eurycleia knowing. And so you think, well, if Eurycleia knows someone who was intimate with Odysseus in a maternal way, why wouldn't someone who was intimate with Odysseus in this marital way have some sense? And then when it comes to the dream thing, she gives him this dream story and says, okay, well, hang on. One other question before you go to bed. Eurycleia, wash your feet. You're going off to bed. I got this little story to tell you. Which is this dream about the geese. She said she saw 20 geese in the yard, and then someone this eagle comes down and kills them all. What do you think? What do you think that's all about? So she pitches him this underhanded pitch, this underhanded story, and Odysseus says, "Isn't it obvious the interpretation?" He says, "Be glad." He said, "Renowned Icarius' daughter, here's a dream, but something that's real as day, something that's about to happen. All these geese were suitors. And the bird was I. See now, I'm no eagle, but your Lord, come back to bring inglorious death upon them all." She saw this in the dream. And as he said this, my hunting slumber left me. Peering through the half-shut eyes, I saw the geese in the hall, still feeding at the self-same trough. So in the dream, Odysseus is the eagle. So what's the beggar supposed to say? So Master of Subtle Ways replies, I don't know. How can you choose to read the dream differently? Hasn't Odysseus himself shown you what is coming? Death to the suitors, and not one escaping its doom. So she gets him to, I don't know, just sort of try on this suit of this dream, and it seems like it fits. Also, it seems like she's a nudging provocation. But then she responds and says, but no, I don't believe it. She says, there's this nice imagery of dreams. It's a kind of like pre-Freudian psychology, reading of how dreams work. Friend, many a dream is mere confusion, a cobweb of no consequence. There are two gates for dreams. One gate is the honest horn. The other gate is the one of ivory. The horn of honesty is kind of hard, but it's true. And if you can only know it, you can know the truth. In the dreams, you can find truth in dreams, she says. But the other one is the one of fantasy, the one made of ivory and beauty. And that's kind of wish fulfillment stuff. And she says, I think this dream actually is just the wish fulfillment dream. I don't know. In that, I think she is, I think she's doing a little subtle weaving again here. Yeah. A little trickery. And she's trying to poke and prod and find out, trying to draw out Odysseus beyond what he wants to show. And then I think she really presses him, and she drives it home here. The final point is she says the one thing that if he is Odysseus would provoke him most of all, which she says, oh yes. And we hadn't heard anything about this yet. I mean, she's almost gone to bed. She's up the stairs, walking up the stairs. She just throws over her shoulder, oh yeah. And this is a really sad day. I just want to point out, because tomorrow me and this house are parted forever. And then she lays out the story. Oh, I've got this plan where we're going to have a contest to find out who my husband will be. So yeah, this is it. Ho hum. Have a good night.
But even that, Paul, like I often wonder, she sets up the axe handle thing, the archery contest, which she knows Odysseus was good at. And I was reading that.
That's the least way you can say it. She knows he's good at is, I mean, it's even stronger than that. It's an impossible contest. Only Odysseus has any chance, of winning.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And my takeaway question, my lingering question
Yeah.
is back to the getting kids to argue point, which is
Okay.
between Penelope with her challenges, Odysseus with his challenges, and Eurycleia with her challenges. Who's the most honorable and or heroic character in book 19? And you have to
Yeah.
say one person and give an argument.
That's a good one. That's
You know
a
what I
really
mean?
good one.
Yeah, so they look at behavior, and I think I was saying this to a couple of people today in the department. Yeah, students don't write as well as they used to, and we can like clutch our pearls about that. I think a lot of it isn't syntax and punctuation. I
Yeah.
think it's a hesitance to think things boldly and
Hmm.
to judge. And I think it's really good that we live in a much less judgmental time than like my grandparents did.
Yeah.
But one of the weird effects of that, I think, is that when kids are presented with a book, other than like taking quizzes on the plot, they're often hesitant to judge characters.
Yeah.
So to say,
Yeah.
like, according to the landscape of this book so far, this character is behaving in X way or Y way. I want them to. I want them to argue about who the heroic people are, but
Yeah.
not just from their own feelings, because their feelings of heroism actually don't matter at all when you're reading the Odyssey. Like what our feelings are and thoughts are irrelevant. The Odyssey, just like every book, creates its own rule book for ethics and metaphysics and everything else.
Right.
And
Right.
frankly, I read the Iliad deeply this summer. The Iliad's rule book's not this one. This is different. Same writer.
Hmm.
I'm not
Wow.
saying like wildly different, but the landscape is totally different and the challenges are different. So according to the world of this poem, like which of those three characters is most heroic?
Yeah.
And I just like kids. There's no right answer. I mean, I think you can make a case for all of them. That's the point.
Yeah.
You know?
And you should work on it. And working on it, students working on it, forces them to come up with reasons, and those reasons are going to be based in their speculation about reality, about what's good, about what's right, and about what is noble, things they maybe are not comfortable talking about. But I totally agree. I think it has washed out our discipline enormously, because the books are about really just, sort of taking a look. A lot of times I think, just sort of taking a look at lives and just passively looking. They're just spectacles.
Yeah.
But this the Odyssey is not. I mean, it is kind of a spectacle, but it's way more than that. It invites you to make judgments and to see good and evil without it being like a Sunday school book or being didactic.
Right.
At all. But it
It's
portrays
these are complicated, messy people, like real people.
Yeah, extremely.
You
And I
know.
think it's a good way to sort of trick our students into doing something they should be learning to do, as I mentioned earlier, which is, okay, within the context of the book, what do you think is right or wrong? But they're learning how to make judgments that I really don't think you can get along in the world and be a good person without learning how to do. You need to do it without being hypocritical, without being cruel, without being, prejudicial in ways that are just ugly and bad. Still, the people you're around, you need to have people who you can talk with and say, I don't think this person's being a good person right now, or the opposite. Like, these people are great. What they're doing in the world right now, I think is awesome. And this is why those kind of moral judgments, I don't think we can live our lives. We can't live in a good society, in a good world, without making correct ones. And you've got to learn how to make the correct ones. That's hard.
Yeah.
For fear of being judgmental, for fear of getting it wrong, we don't. But that's fear-based, and that's not good.
I think this might be weird to say. I think the act of really good literary reading is a weird balance between text-based confidence judgment and the humility that you actually never can fully know another person, real or fictitious.
Yeah, right.
I think one of the most iconic, important moments in all of literature is Elizabeth Bennet after getting the letter from Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, where he basically tells her the truth of his life, and she had totally misread him. And she has a choice: stick to the prejudicial landscape in her head that she's comfortable with, or change based on the truth.
Yeah.
He says, until this moment, I never knew myself. It's this incredibly humble moment, and that allows her to grow and be happy. That moment of self-awareness.
But it captures both. It captures both the things you're saying, because if she hadn't made that erroneous judgment, she needed to make that judgment at that time.
Fair.
She wouldn't understand herself. She wouldn't understand herself in
That's
it.
a good point.
But she had to have the strength of character to recognize or admit it, and change too. And so you need both. I think the true judgments are they're a life's achievement. They really are. That's the way to see it. I think we've gotten caught up in like this maybe old-fashioned sort of world where there's black and white, good and evil, and everyone should know it, or some stereotype of that.
Right.
Or a contemporary world where anything goes. We don't know if there's any truth. There is no truth. It's just whatever you feel. That to me is not even the real question. It's not even the real problem. The problem isn't whether there's truth or not. It's what is true. What is actually right? What is good? It's finding it, and that I think is the difficulty that really good books like this lay out for you and show you how you better be careful. And also at the same time, you have to do it. You have to do it.
Yeah.
Odysseus has to know that what he's doing is right. He's going to get some things wrong. We've seen him do it, but he moves through the world as a person who takes on the responsibility of finding out what's right. And as a human, you're going to screw that up, but that doesn't mean you're off the hook for doing it.
No, that's good. No, I'm just saying that like if I were to write a paper on the Odyssey, I think a good paper would balance me using the text to confidently talk about Eurycleia's heroism while at the same time acknowledging that I can't fully know her.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, she's a pleasure. She's a pleasure to think about, to try to put yourself in the position of figuring out, like, how does she both know that being a slave is horrifying, and she's noble enough to know that, and at the same time thoroughly 100% loyal to Odysseus and Penelope?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be a blast to try to tease out and try to figure out.
Yeah.
Try to put yourself in that position and understand. It's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah. No, that's good. This is some of these, I think, Paul and I agree that every chapter is worth reading, but some of them really yield, like every time, fruitful conversations. And I think we think this is one of those. So if you're a teacher teaching this, please don't rush through book 19. You might take a couple of days and just have some of those preliminary chats and some writing, or have a day where you read it and talk about it and then some writing, however you want to do it. But this is worth it. This is so relevant to now. It's good in itself. It's well written in itself. That's the real reason to do it. But an ancillary benefit is every kid that we're teaching is trying to figure out both who they are and how they're projecting themselves to the world. And they're all trying to perceive who others are based on how they're projecting themselves. And it's just a landmine of perception. And this book is a Homeric landscape that's an echo of that in a fascinating way. So please don't rush through book 19.
No. And I want to emphasize what you said earlier, Jay, like ask more of your students. It's a place where you can ask more of your students and see what you get for it. You may be really pleasantly surprised. It's not going to land for everyone, but for a lot of kids, it really will. And asking more of them, you'll get more from them. It's shocking. This is a good place. It's a good place to do it. A good place to try it out. Well, all right. I think it's a good place to end for book 19. Again, surprisingly deep and rewarding book to spend some time on. So that's it. That's it for 19. We can see we're not at the end, but we can see the end from here. The next book is 20, and we only go to 24. I think we literally are almost there. Been back home. Yeah, you said that. This has been back home since book 13, and so yeah, it's about time we get this done. Well, thanks for listening. If you like the podcast and gotten something out of it, share it with a teacher friend of yours. Join us in this conversation in the comments section as well. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with episode book 20 next week. All right.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.